Welcome back to my channel for another Nikon episode, or hang on, should I say a Sony episode, or maybe should I say a Sony Nikon wedding episode. I'm not really sure what I should say, but what I can say is that the whole video is about this adapter here. It's the Megadap ETZ21. This adapter, in my opinion, is a true game changer because your Nikon Z camera, be it the C7 Mark II here on the table, or be it the C9, or be it even the APS-C crop camera, the Nikon Z FC, with this adapter, these cameras get access to I don't know how many, 60 plus additional Sony E-Mount lenses just from Sony, and then of course from all the third-party manufacturers like Tamron, Sigma, and what have you, and you can also combine this adapter with other adapters. So it is a game changer. I'm really happy to report about this adapter in this video. Let's get started, let's kick off the show. Let's do some housekeeping first. So Megadap contacted me and asked me if I would care about doing a review about that adapter. And in exchange for a review, they of course sent this adapter to me for free. And I said, of course, I'm interested in doing this because Sony has excellent lenses in the E-Mount system. So for instance, the G-Master lenses, Carl Zeiss lenses, a lot of good lenses, and only a fool would not admit that Sony makes some of the best lenses in the world. So shooting them on a Nikon Z camera body sounds like a pretty good idea to me. The second point is, this is the successor of an existing adapter, which is called the ETZ11. And the new adapter has improved chip, improved software or firmware, depending on how you want to call it, has a better coating of the contacts here, and in general is an improved version of that ETZ11. That's why it is now upgraded, called ETZ21. The third point is, if you look into that box, the way they shipped it to me, there's not a lot of stuff going on inside. So there's a little brochure here, which is not super interesting because it's all in Chinese. And then the only item which is actually interesting is this device here. And this can be used to clip it on the adapter and then do firmware updates via your computer. And getting firmware updates and further improvements from time to time is a good idea. And I think it's very good that Megadap ships this in the box, so you can do this yourself and can keep the software on this tiny little adapter up to date. Since I will focus in the rest of the video on the Nikon Z9, but you can replace it easily by the C7 Mark II, let's start for the sake of completeness just for one Sony E-Mount lens and mount it on the Nikon Z FC to see that this is working on the crop sensor in the same way as you will later see how it is very well working on the full frame sensor. So let's unmount the lens here. That's the usual kit lens. Let's get this off here. Let's put this aside, and then I want to mount now here a very well-known Carl Zeiss lens from Sony. That's the Sony FE 2.8 is the aperture, widest open, and 35mm. It's a very lightweight lens, and I think it should match perfectly the street photography design of the Nikon ZFC. And the way I do this is, let's get the lens cap away here. And let's have a look at the adapter. So here's the mount side, and there is a little red dot here and there's a white dot here, and it matches immediately. And then you just rotate it until it clicks. You heard the click? That's fine. And now we can mount it on the camera body. And for doing so, we have again to follow here the markings, and then we just rotate it on until it clicks again. Let's see. Here we go. And now we have, and that's actually a beautiful design, a Sony Carl Zeiss lens mounted on the Nikon ZFC. And I think that fits very well, and it also works very well. So let's have a look. So let's remove the lens cap here. We have here a natural lens hood, which can be mounted on the lens and unmounted. And let's switch the camera on. And then we have here autofocus working. You see this is turning into green. This is too close for the E-Mount lens. So let's get this out of the way. And let's focus on the model here. And then you see how this is focusing. And if we go now in the eye menu here, maybe let's go here to autofocus continuous. And let's go here to tracking. So for instance, here we go for people. And then it should actually recognize, you see here with the yellow little rectangle here, is recognizing the eye of the model, and is also very sticky. And this is not even a real model. So on the APS-C crop sensor, this works quite speedy and is very much spot on. So nothing to complain here, and I think is proof of evidence that on these cropped sensors in the Nikon Z system, this is working like a charm. And it is actually quite quick. Let's for a moment go back here on the eye menu here to single autofocus, and let's go back here to single point autofocus. And if you look at that now, so if I point at something, it turns green immediately. Quite nice. Whatever it finds with focus, it gets green. Here it has to hunt a bit, but then it gets green. And I think in general, the Nikon CFC is not the greatest autofocus in the world anywhere. You will see that on the Nikon Z9, this gets much, much better. But for an adapter, I should say this is really surprising how quick it works and how quickly it finds focus. Look here. Very quick, no matter what I do. Quite nice. Here's another example I wanted to quickly show. So that's now the C7 Mark II, and there is a Sony E-Mount lens, namely the ZEISS Batis 240, which I think is a beautiful lens and also has a splendid optical performance. And actually, if you look at that, fits the Nikon Z7 Mark II very well. And the adapter is so small, it's hardly recognizable in between the lens and the camera body. And it also works in the same way as what we saw before. Very good on autofocus. You see this turns green immediately no matter where I focus. The single autofocus works very well, and clearly the Z7 Mark II already has a better autofocus system than the Nikon CFC, which we just saw, and then it will get even better on the Nikon Z9, of course. But that looks actually really good. Let's try to get focus tracking here. So let's go to autofocus continuous, and let's get here into the tracking area for people. And let's see, yes, it recognizes the body here. You see that on the 40mm lens, and then if I get a bit closer, it also recognizes the face and the eye. So quite nice. It gets sticky. It works in the expected way, and I should say in terms of focusing speed, I hardly recognize any difference to native Nikon Z lenses. Maybe in a very demanding sports situation you will see that, and clearly it's always better to have an original Nikon Z lens paired with a Nikon Z camera body. But I think the way they implemented this on this Megadap ETZ21 adapter is pretty impressive. Now let's pause for a moment and let's ask the following question. If you're a Nikon Z shooter, why would you want to go for Sony E-Mount lenses? And there are basically two reasons. One reason could be that you came from Sony and you switched to Nikon and you have a good collection of Sony E-Mount lenses in your lens portfolio and you want to further use them. Then I think the Megadap adapter is just your solution, because you see that even the autofocus is carried over if you combine the adapter with a Sony E-Mount lens and a Nikon Z camera body. The second reason could be that you shoot with several brands and you have actually some Sony E-Mount lenses which are not available yet in the Nikon Z system. And here's an example of such a lens. So this is the G Master 85mm widest open f1.4, and in the Nikon Z camera system you currently only have an 85mm portrait lens with widest open f1.8. And if we look into the lens planning forward from Nikon, we find that there is actually another 85mm planned. And if we look at the sketchy design of that lens, it looks like then we get a wider open aperture, so maybe an f1.4 or even an f1.2. But for the time being, the best you get is 85mm for a Nikon Z lens with f1.8. And then you might want to go for a G Master lens if you have it and mount it on the Nikon Z9, for instance, which is what I'm going to do now. And then I will look again into autofocus and will also show a couple of sample images which I just shot with this lens on the Nikon Z9. You see now here the G Master 85mm f1.4 mounted on the Nikon Z9. Again, the adapter from Megadap ETZ21 is almost not recognizable, and it actually looks quite nice. It's as if this G Master lens would have been built for the Nikon Z9. I actually think in general the design between Nikon and Sony is matching quite well. And now we shoot this widest open at f1.4. So here's an aperture ring. We'll see this again in a moment on another G Master lens, and it has the usual clicks. I'll show it again because I love it so much, but I already show it here. Listen to the sound. How beautiful is that? Now let's go to f1.4. Let's focus at the model here and let's see what we get. And I'm here, of course, at continuous autofocus 3D tracking spot metering. And you see it's immediately jumping to the eye here. It also gets very sticky and there is absolutely no delay. If I halfway press the shutter button, watch this now. it's immediately on the eye. So the autofocus is so quick that, as I said before, there is hardly any difference recognizable between a native Nikon Z lens and this Sony G Master lens. Now, of course, G Master lenses have a fantastic build for the autofocus, but the adapter is doing a great job in connecting the terrific autofocus system of the camera body of the Nikon Z9 with the very well built autofocus mechanism in the G Master lens here with 85mm. Here are a couple of portraits I did shoot with that lens, and you see the nice soft background blurriness and bokeh. You see how sharp this is in the foreground where the focus was hitting, and this was all taken with autofocus and in basically no time. So I'm quite happy with the result, and I think is clearly proof of evidence that with this camera lens combo, the adapter in between, of course, you can actually natively shoot like if you would completely play in the Sony universe when it comes to lens and camera body, or in the Nikon universe again when it comes to camera body and then a Nikon lens. Is absolutely flawless. Speaking about the G Master 85mm from Sony, there's one remark I want to basically make here, and there is something interesting going on. Mounting this lens on the Megadap adapter needed considerably more force than mounting some other E-mount lenses. I don't know why this is the case, because it should be the same mount, and most of the lenses I mounted on this adapter just very smoothly were able to screw them on and then they clicked in. On this one here, it needed me considerable force, which I cannot explain, but is something at least I wanted to mention for the sake of completeness. So if your lens is not immediately fitting in the smoothest and softest way, maybe you need some force, but don't break it. Be careful, of course. These lenses are very expensive and the camera body is even more expensive. Another lens I obviously had to try out is this one here, and that's the very famous G Master 24mm f1.4, and that lens is a dream for landscape photographers, but in particular also for people shooting the night sky and astrophotographers. And here's a sample image which I shot with that lens here on the Nikon Z9, and see how pinpoint sharp the stars are and how there are no errors coming from a perfect optical construction. And if you look at how this lens matches the camera body, is quite nice. Again, the design is very much compatible. These lenses look very good on Nikon Z camera bodies, and since we now have an absolutely flawless autofocus, they can also be used even in situations where the shot counts and where you don't want to miss a shot because you have an adapter which only allows for manual focus. Here you see in front of me another excellent Sony G Master lens, which I tested on my Nikon Z9. And if you look at that, again, you see sitting between the camera body on the mount is the ETZ21, tiny, almost to be overlooked, but very effective. And then we have here this G Master lens, and if you look at that, it's kind of a new lens in the market because it's a successor of a well-established lens. So it's the Sony FE 2.8 70-200mm G Master, optically stabilized, and it's the Mark II lens, so the brand new version of it. It's a fantastic lens with a lot of control elements. I think it would deserve a separate review, but for the time being it's all about the ETZ21. So let's test this out. By the way, we have a beautiful aperture ring here. Listen to the click. Wonderful, I love it. A like-alike experience. Let's open this widest to f2.8. Let's go to 70mm and let's see how the autofocus is performing. In terms of focus settings, I'm at continuous autofocus, I'm at 3D tracking and spot metering. And if I aim at the model here, and then you see how it immediately jumps on the eye if I halfway press the shutter button. It's also very sticky, and there is absolutely no delay. This is as quick as if you would focus with a native Nikon lens. So quite impressive. Let's go to 200mm. Let's zoom this in here and let's see if I aim at the chest of the model. You see how it jumps immediately on the eye. Quite nice. And from time to time it's switching. And I had on rare occasions that it loses focus, but in general it's working very well. And it's quite impressive that, you know, Megadap managed to get a tiny little adapter which replicates the typically brilliant performance in terms of focus mechanism in these G Master lenses for a Nikon Z-mount situation. Previously in the video I mentioned two major reasons why Nikon Z shooters might consider shooting Sony E-Mount lenses. And the first was you might come from the Sony world and might have migrated into the Nikon world, and then you have a bunch of lenses which you still want to use. The second is, like we looked into the 85mm f1.4 G Master lens, that the lens you're looking for might not yet be available in the Nikon Z portfolio. And there is a third reason, and that's third-party lenses like this one here, which is a Tamron lens, which I personally find a fantastic zoom lens, although I'm primarily a prime lens shooter, which only exists for Sony E-Mount, is not available for Nikon Z mount or for Fuji or for Canon, only exclusively for Sony E-Mount at this point in time. And this lens is a very good lens. I really like it. I will show sample images in a moment. It's the 35mm to 150mm, and it has an aperture widest open f2 to f2.8. So this really provides a very shallow depth of field if you go into the tele area, and a very smooth bokeh. Originally I purchased this lens for my Sony Alpha 1 in situations where I need a lot of flex, and 35mm is not the best wide angle setting. I personally like more if it starts at 24mm, but 35 is good enough for most shooting situations. But being able to go up to 150mm and having widest open f2.8 is just a blessing. And I think this lens is terrific. With the Megadap ETZ21 I can also now shoot it on the Nikon Z9, but as I said, originally I purchased this for my Sony Alpha 1. Autofocus performance again is very good, and I'm here at 70mm. If I halfway press the shutter button, it typically recognizes the face or the eye immediately. It's sticky, it's working. Let's have a look into sample images and judge yourself how well this Tamron lens is performing on my Nikon Z9. The last field of applications for the Megadap ETZ21 I want to open here now are cinema lenses. And Sony is known for excellent cinema lenses. So for instance here we have the FE4 PZ, stands for Power Zoom 28 to 135 G lens, optically stabilized. And that is a lens which is typically used on cinema cameras from the Sony lineup, and can now be used with this Megadap ETZ21 also on Nikon cameras for movie making. And that is something which I at least wanted to quickly mention. I'll mount it now, I'll show you quickly what you can do with it, and then we conclude the video. Having mounted this power zoom lens here from Sony from the cinema lineup, again looks pretty well on the Nikon Z9 camera body. And there are different elements here which are very interesting, because these power zoom lenses, they have a zoom here which is motorized so you can use it, and they should also pick up on face and eye recognition very quickly. So let's see how this plays out. So we have here, I have this at f4 now, and let's look if I get my model here into focus. Yes, and it's also sticky here, so that works. Let's zoom now with the motor zoom. Let's get closer, very smooth. You see, for videographers, just the perfect way. And then here, see how it recognizes the eye. So this opens a whole new world for video making and videographers on Nikon Z cameras if you can mount these Sony cinema lenses on a Nikon Z9, for instance. And I think that's a good point to conclude the video. And all in, I did fully enjoy shooting that Megadap ETZ21 on my Nikon Z cameras, in particular on the Nikon Z9. I think the adapter works very well. There are a couple of flaws which I think need to be fixed. First of all, this lens here mounted very easily, no force again. The G Master 85mm, almost impossible to screw on, and I needed to be very careful not to break something. The second is the metadata is not correctly transported sometimes. So on the Tamron 35 to 150mm and the sample images, you saw actually that it said 155mm instead of 150. So there are tiny little things which can be improved, but the general proof of evidence for the concept of having that improved ETZ21 the successor of the ETC11, is just gorgeous. And I think it opens up a whole new world for Nikon Z shooters in terms of access to excellent lenses in the Sony E-Mount universe, including cinema lenses. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel, there is always more to come. Thanks for watching, stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.